with myself, Curtis Shuck, the Carbon Wildcat. Sorry, I had to throw that in. Fun story on that. We'll get to later in today's discussion, but want to say thanks to Leslie Sebastian from our team, who is running the show here and letting folks in, and she'll be fielding questions and what have you. So thanks, Leslie. She's actually the organizer and brainchild of this webinar program. So anyway, thanks for that. A couple things here, just quick orders of business. So we've got a packed agenda, which is pretty typical to the Well Done program, which is generally summed up by 5 pounds in a 2-pound sack. And but we're going to power through it here. This isn't, the last of these by any means. So if there are items that we don't cover today, we'll be covering them in the future. And our whole intent of this series is to have these periodic discussions about the processes around methane measurement for orphaned, abandoned, and idle wells, and be able to relay some of those lessons learned from the field to help, number one, keep folks safe, but number two, to make this work as effective, reliable, and as integrity full as possible, because it's so critical. There's a lot of crazy science out there right now, and a lot of folks that don't understand what's happening or how we do the calculations, and we'll be getting into a lot of that here as we're moving forward. But just wanted to say thank you, and again, appreciate everybody coming today. So my name is Curtis Shuck. I am the chairman of the Well Done Foundation. Founded this organization in 2019. And to date are measuring wells all across the country for lots of different reasons, all quantifying methane under just different programs. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those today. I did want to start then today going through the program, and we'll just make sure that our deck is going to move here. So here's the agenda for today. Sorry about that. So we're going to go through, kind of our introductions. We'll get introductions from you folks later. We've got a little disclaimer we need to share. We have a safety moment, of course, which is how we start all of our days. And then Leslie, is everybody seeing the screen? We good there?
Yep. Just got a question about it. So if anybody isn't seeing the screen, please put it in the chat box.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully you should see the agenda that's up now. And we're good there. Okay, good. Anyway, so we'll have a safety moment, anatomy of an orphan well. We're just going to go through the types of wells that we're dealing with out there. We're going to talk about things like site access requirements. We're going to talk about site safety. We're going to talk about detection versus quantification, and then some of the systems overview. We're hoping that we're going to be about 40 minutes and then leave plenty of time for questions and answers. And again, if we need to do more, certainly happy to extend if we need to do that. So that is the general approach here for today for this kickoff of our program. So a little bit about the Well Done Foundation. As I said, formed in 2019 after a kind of an epiphany for me anyway at that time. Remember, that was long before orphan wells were cool. Everybody's dirty little secret at that point in time, and I kind of stumbled into my first interaction. and just felt compelled to do something. Didn't know what, but felt compelled to take action. One of the things that we tell people all day, every day, is that the Well Done Foundation is in the get shit done business, and I think that you'll see that by a lot of the activities. We're currently measuring orphan, and, abandoned, and idle wells in 14 states across the U.S. Actually, 15 now with the introduction of California. I'm actually sitting in Bakersfield today, California, where we're working on a large group of wells out here. Our mission, as you see there, is to plug orphan wells, right? End of the day, orphan oil and gas wells, resulting in the elimination of methane emissions, fighting climate change, and leaving things better than the way that we found them, one stinking well at a time, right? So, and to date, I think we're at 43 wells as of today. Yes, thank you for that. So, yeah, so that is where we're at this point in time. I did want to give, I'm getting ahead of myself here, and I'm really rolling here. I did want to start with a brief safety moment. And the safety moment is essentially this, is that, never let your guard down, right? I mean, that's sort of the takeaway for me. And I'll give you a quick example. I was on an orphan well measuring job in New Mexico a couple of weeks ago. And it was late on a Sunday, and we were out until after dark, as we typically work until dark, and then wrap up and head back to the barn. We were a couple hours away from Hobbs, New Mexico, out in the Permian Basin, and we had been measuring around high levels of H2S all day long. So depending on what those impacts were, we were either under air or not, depending on the levels of gas. And so we got back in the pickup truck, and we were headed for Hobbs, and driving down the Lease Road, and all of a sudden our H2S alarm started to go off in the cab of the pickup truck. And we looked at each other like, what the heck, right? Where are the samples that we were taking during the day? Did somebody put those in the pickup? And so we kept moving down the Lease Road, and you could certainly, tell that there was gas in the cab of the truck at high levels, obviously high enough to trigger the alarms on our H2S monitors. We drove past the area, we stopped, and it was dark, of course, grabbed some lights, walked back towards the area where that gas was at. There were no orphan wells in the area, and our alarm started going off again, at which point we turned around and hightailed it for the truck. As it turns out, we reported that to the state of New Mexico, and what had happened was that there was a pipeline leak on a sour gas transmission line that was headed to one of the gas plants, and fairly significant in nature. But the takeaway is, again, is to always be prepared, and whether you're driving to or from the location, or you're on the location, always be present with what the plan is, having your safety equipment there. Luckily, it wasn't worse than it was. It was a calm night. It was cool, so the gas was laying down kind of in where the roadway was situated, but it could have been certainly could have been a lot worse. And so again, the takeaway for us is to just always be heads up ball, head on a swivel as you're out there making your way. All right, here's a quick disclaimer. So today's webinar is not qualified measurement specialist QMS certification. Today's webinar is being presented, courtesy of the Well Done Foundation, and we're trying to provide some overview, processes, procedures, equipment developed by Well Done Foundation and our partners, for the express purpose of orphan, abandoned, and idle well methane quantification. This work is not for the do-it-yourselfers. One of the reasons why we're actually holding these seminars is because I'm becoming increasingly alarmed at the amount of traffic that I see out there, especially in the social media world, about folks dabbling in this space, out with every kind of contraption you can imagine, from stuff that looks like it came out of the, out of the garage, to something from your landscaper's toolbox. People who are not prepared and have no business being out there. And so, our point is, look, this work is dangerous at every level, and needs to be performed by trained professionals who are using the appropriate equipment that is certified for use in these hazardous areas. And just a warning that today some of our images might be a little bit graphic, and some of my conversation might be a little bit graphic as well. And so that's just again how it is, because we want to put it out there. One of the things about orphan wells, and for any of you that have seen those up close and personal, and we get a lot of questions about this across, all of the networks of, why aren't the wells being turned back to production? What's wrong? Look, these wells, infrastructure is either failed or is failing. There's a reason these wells are orphaned. There's a reason they're not in production. And many of these locations that we come to are ticking time bombs. I was just on several locations here in the Central Valley yesterday where, people in their ultimate wisdom felt that they were doing a solid by replacing leaky valves with a bull plug, for instance, right? And then tightening it down. The problem with that, then, of course, is there's no way to relieve the pressure on that bull plug and release the stored energy without performing a hot tap, or launching the bull plug into space. We come across things like this every darn day out there in the field. It's just head shakers. And again, that's why we're so passionate about the fact that this is dangerous work and really needs to be completed by professionals. So we want to talk a little bit about an anatomy of an orphan well. Good point there about smelling H2S, and I'll bring that up because you'll get a chance to see it. And these wells in particular are these open hole orphan wells. And the question is, can't smell H2S, can't smell methane, right? Typically in their pure forms, they are an odorless gas. What happens is that oftentimes these gases, and you're going to see this in a little bit here in looking at some of the constituents in our gas analysis from the laboratory. And what happens is things like methane and H2S, they hang out with stinky friends, right? And that, so in some respects, that's actually a good thing because it can give a little bit of a heads up. But in other respects, you may not have that. Or in the case, for instance, of H2S, if the gas is super overwhelming, your senses will be quickly desensitized, and you're overwhelmed quickly with H2S gas. And so again, it's pretty unforgivable. And so, and in looking at the images on your screen today, these are wells from literally across the country. And but this is what an open hole is essentially. It's a well that doesn't have control at the surface. Whether it's just an open wellbore, or the second from the left there is an orphan well that we located in the Permian Basin in Texas that was just ripping methane and H2S gas to the surface, to Montana plug-in job there that you see with the rock on top of it, just trying to slow things down, to a brine seep in Oklahoma that was moving gas. And and believe me, this is in no means meant to be an exhaustive example of what open holes are, but this is part of the challenge, as you can see from this type of a configuration, is how do you get rigged up on it, and how do you actually effectively measure and monitor? And those are great questions, because we're going to talk a little bit about that. The next type of orphan well, figure out how to do this now, is a well with some form of control on the surface, right? So that's some type of mechanical apparatus that has been left behind, and believe me, there's all types and forms. This is part of training that we did for the Kentucky Department of Oil and Gas, or KDOG, last year, as they were looking at sending folks out into the field. So what we've done is we've identified oh, okay. Anyway, so we are showing here what some of those elements are at the surface, right? I don't know if I can get these notes. Can you guys see that now? Maybe that's better. I moved the notes off. You guys can see the full screen. Thanks. Anyway, so well control, what are some of the elements? So number one is sort of the rod and packing assembly that's been left behind. Number two is sort of the configuration up at the tubing assembly there, and valving that takes things to the marketplace. Number three is down then in the Braden head, or the wellhead assembly, packing assembly there, on the casing side. And so we're going to talk about three specific approaches today in the measurement and monitoring under those three specific conditions. One of the things that is important about this, however, though, and like we told the folks there at KDOG, is do not touch, right? And oftentimes what happens, again, remember, in addition to flammable gas and poisonous gas, there is also a significant amount of stored energy that can be behind these wells. The thing of it is you don't know until it's possibly too darn late. And so that's why an abundance of caution is absolutely critical. And I would tell you that it's very much like my days on the ski hill, where you have to rely on your gut and things like avalanche safety. So very much the same as being a well whisperer. And that is, if your gut is telling you something's not right, you need to absolutely listen to that, because there are leaking valves, there are leaking packing, there are infrastructure components that are, like I said, if they're not failed yet, they're on the verge of failing. One brush by a cow, or one whack with the combine as you're driving by, or just its time has come, and those wells can open up. And so that's always part of the challenge in terms of coming up with a safe scenario to be able to rig to a well, and rig to a well safely. Every well is different, and every well requires a little different strategy, and different equipment potentially as well. But these are certainly the areas that we encourage people to not monkey with, because that's what can really tend to wreck your day. Next, I wanted to talk about site access. And site access is a really important component. Some people may not think about this until it's too late. Again, also part of the challenge out there is people are watching the Carbon Wildcat series and deciding that they want to do that too, right? Well, what happens is that can lead to things like trespass, which is a criminal offense, by the way, and also subject to retribution by a potentially grumpy landowner that's exercising their Second Amendment right? So super cautious about how you approach any type of site access. For us, it requires a right of entry. It requires insurance. It requires notification. It requires ingress, focus on ingress and egress routes and habits. We have some agreements that have very defined travel paths, and hell if is to be paid if you wander off of those. Always be just thinking about being a good neighbor, and how you can leave things better than the way you found them, and not create additional impacts. But that's one of the immediate key items that I wanted to just hammer home here today. And as you can see, we're working on projects literally all across the country that have any number of site access attributes then that need to be taken into consideration, and everything from being deep in the forest of Appalachia to potentially getting stuck if you're not careful. Remember, every one of these sites, you're not ever always able to drive a vehicle and bring all of your equipment to. We probably walked way more than we drive to. It's great when you're able to have a drive up, but certainly is not always the condition. Many of these locations are in commercial areas, like the well you see up there in California that we're working on currently. So you've got all kinds of issues relative to access and parking, and just communication with the potential stakeholders or those who are interested. Just below that is a shot of trying to stay ahead of the herd. Out there in New Mexico can be pretty tough, but again, is working around and on active agricultural type features. This is on an active ranch out there with lots of interested neighbors. I would tell you that they're pretty hard on equipment, so you need to definitely be thinking about that as you're doing your business. To a location that we were just on recently in Santa Barbara County, that was a location of a homeless encampment. And so that brings up all kinds of additional elements, as you can only imagine, for safety and ingress, egress, being a good neighbor, to working in folks' front yards like you see there. And again, all of those attributes that go around. And so again, please focus on those key elements of site access, and be thoughtful about how you approach that, because what happens is then otherwise you're making it tough for those of us that are doing this legitimately and trying to do it the right way. The next is site safety. So before you even get in the pickup truck in the morning, and certainly before you get out of the pickup truck and get too far down the road on your particular project, we want to make sure that you guys are focused on and always thinking about having a safety plan. The time to have a safety plan is not after you need it. It's well before, and being trained and tested and briefed on that. Every location, like you may have a general safety plan that covers a lot of your activities, but every location requires a specific safety briefing. And the reason for that is the conditions are different, right? Different attributes, different risks, different mitigation strategies. So be thoughtful of that. We'll have, our teams will measure as many as 5 to 7 wells a day. So that means that we're doing 5 to 7 different safety briefings, individual safety briefings then throughout the day that require attention and documentation. Be thinking about the equipment that you have and that you are positioned with. You got the appropriate PPE either on or available to you. That you're actively monitoring the situation. That you've got everything that you need to make it work. And if you don't, make sure that you take a hot minute and make sure that you have it, and don't take that risk. Notifications are critical to know where and who to notify in case of various levels of response. Having your muster point set, and then also having ingress and egress paths identified. Again, before you start the project, not when there's an issue. Here's just some shots here of some of our teams working around in different areas. We're often measuring and monitoring around and with active plug-in crews. And so whether we're in the field as a team or we're part of a larger operation, making sure that everybody understands what's going on those locations is critical. Wanted to bring up a point here and why those safety plans are so critical. And I shared this a week or so ago. This is a site we were on recently in New Mexico. We had reported, after we had done our methane quantification, we had reported this well back as being a highly dangerous well, called it an angry well. And so we were in advance of the plug-in crew. The plug-in crew arrived the following week after we were done. They were in the process of placing a blowout preventer on the well. They lost well control. And as you can see in the center photograph, they had a really bad day. Luckily, no one was injured or killed in this event, but what it does highlight, and then of course the upper right is the aftermath. The takeaway from this is again that using the appropriate equipment in these hazardous situations, in these hazardous areas, is absolutely critical, because you do not get a second chance. And so that's why having a site safety program is so absolutely critical. So now we're going to get into the meat of things. We're going to talk about how we're doing the work out there in a couple of different circumstances. So this is an open hole methane quantification project we were on recently in Oklahoma. And this is, as you see on the left there, open hole. It was actively venting methane up through the water column. Can only assume that there was some level of casing in that well at some point. What happens oftentimes is a lot of those legacy wells from back in the day may or may not have had casing removed as part of the war efforts, and so you're left behind with just a hole to the surface, right? So you're not really sure exactly what you've got. But obviously, this was a well that was emitting gas to the surface, undocumented. It wasn't on the list for the state of Oklahoma. So what our team did then was deployed a chamber, and affectionately referred to as Dorothy. You guys have probably seen these in many of our social media posts. But Dorothy's job is really to act as a platform for instrumentation. And then once we were able to do the safety evaluation, set the chamber on top, then after we went through and did our methane and H2S quantification to make sure that we were working within the safe limits, then we were able to rig up the quantification instrumentation, or the measurement instrumentation, to begin the process. This particular well, as you see there, was measuring for a period of about 47 hours. You're going to see why that's important here. This is our gas sample collection. There we use third-party labs for independent gas analysis. Why that is so important, and you can see in that center shot there, we certainly will be sharing this with everyone. But it's not just methane. There are other flammable gases that are a part of that in addition to H2S. You can see that this particular well had about 50 parts per million H2S. Certainly is above the safe working area, but not with as much circulation as we had, not in a scenario where we had to go under air. And then on the far right side, under the reporting piece, and you're going to get a chance to see a little bit more here in just a second, is why a measurement over a 47-hour period was really beneficial in this regard. Here's a better shot of that using the Vent Buster program. And what you see here is that, and this is typical for every well that we come across, every well has a personality, every well has different attributes. And what's really critical to see here is that over that 47.4-hour period, there was a lot of activity. And even towards the end of the test, you can see that the trend line was that that well was just getting more active. Part of the challenge in the industry today is that there's a lot of discussion that you only need a 2-hour measurement, right? You only need a 2-hour measurement in order to qualify for different carbon offset programs. Well, and that is true, but you need the right 2 hours. And I will tell you, after doing thousands and thousands of these, that that more is better. More data is always better. And so we always talk to our customers and clients about the fact that, you need to spend a little bit more time on the front end to get a really good example of what's happening on the back end. That's also one of the reasons why this notion of a point and shoot or a point in time measurement really doesn't do anybody justice or the program justice at the end of the day, when you can see why the data like this is so critical. So this is just a illustration of the data for us provided by partners at VentBuster. The next shot here is what the data looks like when it comes in and the data analysts are doing their job, which is just a bunch of data points that are collected every 10 seconds, downloaded in a CSV file. Then those go in and they're analyzed, and we're always looking for trends and highest points and elongated periods. But really, this is the nuts and bolts behind that work, is to then receive that CSV file. As I mentioned earlier, here's a better shot of the actual gas analysis from this particular well, and you can see then that that in addition to methane, which is a pretty high level, 70% or 705,000 parts per million, pretty significant for sure. And but then there's also that H2S level. I would tell you, we've been upping our game in our field H2S quantification, especially as we've been working in the Permian Basin and are active in these fields that have high levels of H2S. And I just wanted to point out that that's really important no matter where you're working, because H2S can occur and does occur in different pockets, even in the same pool or in the same field. You may be working on wells, on one location or one lease that have no H2S. You drive down the road half a mile and all of a sudden you're faced with, alarming levels that you need to be prepared for. But this is an important shot here to see, like I said, what those other constituents were in this particular well. And then lastly, here is just another view using the program, then the well intel program that takes the VentBuster data and just creates a different type of a report, runs a calculation on how we're arriving at our ultimate methane emission levels. But again, I think the takeaway here is the fact that these wells are active, and to just try to grab a 2-hour shot and call it a day probably isn't going to get you what you want to have done. Next shot here is one on production tubing, and remember that's one of the 3 elements here. This is an Orphan well from New Mexico. This particular well was one that had high levels of H2S, so we started to see that, immediately just from our initial detection sweeps as we were doing the first access to the well. Which meant then that we exercised extreme caution as we were approaching the well, and you get a chance to see that here in just a minute. Obviously, the H2S sampling through a Tedlar bag to the lab was critical, in addition to our field sampling using other methods that then give you a direct indication immediately. And you can see here that then the methane flow measurements were elevated. H2S in this particular well was 5,000 parts per million. And of course, high level of H2S, the methane levels were at about 40%. But this entire project, we were under air as we were actually working at the well emission point itself. Here again is just a shot of how this well performed over the testing period. And again, you can see this was a 16-hour test, but the blue line here is the flow using the vent buster system. And so you can see kind of what that activity level was. And so there again, it's like a point and shoot, or just an initial survey doesn't give you a true and correct picture of the gas until you have a chance to let that run for a period of time, and that flow become what we call normalized. Now, some wells their normal is not even, and you'll see that in some other shots here. This is, again, just what the CSV download looks like after the fact. And here's a shot again of that methane or of the gas analysis, the full spectrum analysis coming back once the lab results are received. We knew this well was at 5,000 in the field using our field analysis kits. And so it just drives again a super high level of respect. 5,000 parts per million is enough to kill you from quite a bit away if the wind's blowing in the right direction. Again, another report here, and part of what was given back to the U.S. Department of Interior for these wells that we were measuring there. And again, just focus on what that activity level was. There was a period of decline, and then the well started kicking back up. The next was a project we were on in Kentucky with the University of Kentucky. And this is one that we performed a casing vent test on. This casing port was wide open, and so this well was, obviously actively leaking gas. The first thing that happens, again, like we talked about earlier, is site safety evaluation. So making sure that we're using detection equipment. I would tell you, we use a whole variety of detection equipment. The purpose for detection for us, for our team, is really just knowing what attributes are there or present at the well. We'll record that, but again, we really rely heavily on our gas analysis from a third-party lab, and that's just because of the level of integrity. But again, we have to know for safety reasons as we're working around each of these wells. Of course, then we're collecting gas samples. We use Tedlar bags across our entire network. The reason for that is that it preserves the H2S sample. or the H2S level. If you use canisters, those can have a chemical reaction with H2S gas because H2S is such a critical factor. Again, it doesn't matter where you're at. It's something that needs to remain a focus and at the top of your list. Here's a shot here of then that rig up in the woods. This is a classic example of the well where you get to walk a mile to, packing all of your equipment up the hill. It wasn't uphill both ways, but it was definitely uphill one way. And so thinking about portability of your equipment, your instrumentation is really critical, just to limit the number of trips that you're having to take up. Again, you get a chance to see here, gas analysis, this well had been idled for, 20 plus years. And it was still producing, 777,000 parts per million of methane gas. Rigged up on this, started the measurement process. And then this is what you see. So remember, this well had been open and flowing. And so this flow line that you see down here at 11 cubic meters per day was pretty standard across, pretty normalized across the program, but still an elevated level of methane emission, which is of high interest, of course, to the Department of Interior as they're doing their review of the effectiveness of their programs across the country. We've got our data sets then that go to the data analysis folks. And then again, all of our gas reporting. And here's another great shot to see of these different constituents that are included in addition to H2S, but there's, propane, butane, pentane, hexane, you name it, and they're present there. So in terms of flammability, in terms of health risks, those are super critical items. Just another shot here of what that report back to the Department of Interior looks like. And then I wanted to talk a little bit here about, coming up with your own checklists and your own processes and procedures. I mean, we've been working at this for 4 years now. We've got a number of hard lessons learned, and we're continually improving, continually evolving our processes. But you've got to have a program that's laid out. What happens is you get out in the field, you got darkness, you're racing, you got weather, you're racing, you get all of these other attributes. It's really critical, folks, to have a checklist. Again, we've learned this the hard way. This is a shot here of our qualified measurement specialists training and certification program. We're happy to announce that we have just recently graduated our first class in New Mexico. We have other classes that are coming up. This is a 37-hour program. 20 hours of that is in the field. The rest is kind of classroom and other teachings. But it's absolutely critical. And, we've taken that now to sort of the next level where we're actually working on more of an apprenticeship type of a program, or an opportunity for people to spend more time with us in the field in these different areas, just to get that higher level of understanding and higher level of training. And so, the one thing about this is that, again, there's a lot going on any given day. It is dangerous work. It does require training. It does require a healthy degree of respect for the infrastructure that you're working around. Very little information is often not available on these wells. The maintenance history, the activity history, even knowing what was initially in the well. Many of these wells are wells that have, like I said, were predated many of the reporting requirements in the various states, which can vary greatly from state to state. So with that, we're gonna close this segment, and we'll certainly are gonna open up the discussion now and the questions. So Leslie, if you're able to manage that for us and get that started, I think I'll leave this up and we'll rock and roll. Just want
Sure.
to say as we're done here that there's more of these to come. If we didn't cover something you were specifically interested in, we'll be certainly hitting those up later. So go ahead, Les.
Sure, I'm going to go through the chat box, but if anyone has more questions, please put them in the chat box, or you can text the number that's listed in the chat box as well. So let me, there's a specific question about slide 16. If you wouldn't mind looking for that, Curtis. But in the meantime, Frank asked, are any of these wells present in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia, or Alabama?
Awesome. So start with the easy one first, and the short answer to that is yes. There are wells in several of the states that you had listed there. And one of the things that's interesting is that every state has a different platform by which they catalog those, by which they may report those by location. There are ways to look for those. I'd encourage you to, if you've got interest, you can certainly reach out. We can maybe help you with that. But yes, orphan wells are all over the place. There's not necessarily one single location that has an exclusive on those. Some states traditionally haven't had much in the way of oil and gas exploration or production. Others certainly have. What was the specific question here on the
Sure.
slide?
So Emma's asking, and excuse my pronunciation, Emma's asking, that looks like diurnal variation. After 48 hours, would it have dropped again and cycled 12 through 24 hours?
Sure. And so I think the question is the impact of temperature to this. I'm assuming is what that could have been referring to. Remember, this test was performed using the measurement chamber, and the flow was really quite low if you look up here. So tracking that is certainly more sensitive. But I would say yes. I think that you would have seen as this time cycled back out during another 24-hour period that it would have some relativity to temperature. But I'll tell you, we're rigged up on a well right now today, and I can even show you what that looks like. Maybe I say that only because I would hate to completely lose it here as I'm looking at one of our potential live views. We can get back to that. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we've got more questions. So Luke asked, has the Well Done Foundation considered integrating low carbon cement options into the plugging process?
And that's a great question, Luke, and thank you. And I would tell you, absolutely, yes, we have. And yes, we are actually. In many locations, we're using a carbon light cement material. And in fact, many of the cement manufacturers now are moving towards that because of their own business requirements. And so we're certainly excited to be able to use that material. And then we're even using additional additives on top of that, things like a hemp product, industrial hemp product that we've developed with some partners in Montana that acts as a lost circulation material, especially on the bottom plugs of these older wells that are really difficult sometimes to to be able to get that cement to stay and not just take off into the formation. But yes, we're always looking at that. And I would tell you, Luke, that's a great point, because there's a lot of discussion. I'm sure that you guys are, have seen that out there about plug integrity over periods of time, and, plugs that have failed, because of either, not great materials or not great preparation or not great practices. And so there is a lot of work and a lot of opportunity, I think, in that space now for having enhanced materials or new materials being used. But yes, directly to your question, yes, we do use carbon light cement wherever it's available.
Okay, I'm going to just do this one quickly because I know some people have to leave. Emma asked, will you be doing a similar webinar about plugging these wells? And the answer to this is we're going to be doing a lot of webinars, including that. And for everyone to know, on March 6th, we have a webinar, which you can sign up for on our website, on LinkedIn, or on Eventbrite. And that will be a webinar after Curtis is on the Hill in Washington advocating for smart policies concerning measurement and orphan wells. So March 6th. And again, you can sign up for that at Eventbrite, LinkedIn, or on our website. Okay, a next question. Are there any real-time continuous measurements of H2S or methane?
So the answer to that is yes. In fact, we're currently measuring an orphan well here in California. All of our wells are actually reporting in real time up to the cloud. Our system we're currently using is Vent Buster. Be happy to show you how that works and what those levels are. So we'd be able to, we can, number one, view that remotely. And then number two, kind of get a sense from that is exactly what's happening in that particular well. The well that we're measuring on right now has been running for about 48 hours. And that's absolutely critical, is to be able to see that. We do have the ability to share those measurements in real time with other stakeholders, depending on who that work is being done for. But yes, there are systems that do allow that.
Okay, and that was from Jeff. Sorry about that. Jeff didn't say your name. John asked, can the value of carbon credit offsets offset the cost of quantifying CH4?
In some cases, yes, absolutely. In some cases, the value of a carbon offset can hopefully help to offset the cost of the actual plugging as well. It really depends on, getting in and doing the quantification work. Of course, quantification for carbon credit development is way more intense, takes more of it over a longer period of time than work we do, for instance, for under the IIJA program. And again, while the various methodologies may require a certain number of measurements over a certain number of days as a minimum, remember it is just that, and it does certainly, I think, justify having a more robust measurement program on the front end, so that you're number one seeing what the characteristic of the well is, and then being able to accurately report that back. But yes, our hope is absolutely. But every one of these projects is its own victory, and whether it's a 12-hour measurement or several 12-hour measurements or longer period of time, it's critical to be able to tell the story, because even if it doesn't cover the cost of either quantification or plugging, it certainly is valuable information to share with the public.
Okay, and then from Curtis, I have, will there be any more training opportunities available in the Permian Basin?
Absolutely. So we have QMS training coming up again in out of our operation base in Hobbs, New Mexico. And so if you wouldn't mind shooting an email either to the website or directly to me, we can get you dialed in on that. We don't have it currently scheduled We have work that we're going to be doing coming up in Oklahoma and Ohio, and then back in the Permian Basin, and then actually here in California. So yes, Curtis, would love to see that class.
Okay, and from Jim we have, what methodology is used to extrapolate the gas leakage you measured, such that carbon credits can be claimed? How many days, months, years of leak are assumed? I don't know how much you want to get into that, Curtis, but maybe just a general answer.
Yeah, sure, you bet. So typically right now, we're using the American Carbon Registry methodology for calculating methane flows and developing sort of what that carbon credit potentiality is, if you would, obviously subject to third-party validation and verification. But I would also tell you that all of our public-facing information that we provide relative to impacts of an orphan well or the emissions of an orphan well will use the IPCC, or the United Nations Interplanetary Commission on Climate Change, or whatever that acronym stands for. But it's anyway, it is the United Nations program, and they have greenhouse gas emission calculations for the various gases. And of course, methane gas is one of the higher, not the highest, but one of the highest greenhouse gases. So they'll put what they call a global warming potential to that. We currently use that in all of our public facing information, because the reality is that's really the 20-year impact is the one that we're all living with and facing today. And then, so typically what we'll do then as well as is under the American Carbon Registry, is it is the emission calculation then multiplied over a 20-year crediting period. And Jeff, I hope I answered your question there, but that's typically the approach. Now, different registries have different protocols, but our base is typically the American Carbon Registry.
Okay, and we just have time for a couple more. I want to get to Jane's because it speaks specifically to this webinar. Jane asks, can you talk about your views on the potential for workforce development in this work? I'm assuming she means measurement of wells. How many jobs could be created? Do you think states need to invest more in workforce programs? I'm in Colorado, and our state commission is saying we don't need more workers to clean up orphan wells, and that the funding from IIJA cannot be spent on workforce programs. Thanks for that question, Jane.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jane, and that's certainly one that's near and dear to our heart here at the Well Done Foundation. One of the things that gets me up every morning is the opportunity for more jobs to be created in a new space. So while maybe that reference from the state of Colorado is correct, where we don't need more workforce, we just need to use the existing oil and gas workforce to plug the wells, and that's you can debate whether how correct that is or isn't. But I would tell you that the quantification work that we're doing and that others are doing, these are new jobs. This is a new skill set. Sure, oil and gas workers can be transitioned into doing this work, and it does require a certain amount of well whispering and well prowess. But I would also tell you that that it does require a certain finesse and an instrumentation type of an approach. And so we're excited about the fact that there is a workforce development component. We're actually, working with several states on that. Here in California, that's actually a very high criteria for folks like CalGEM or the California Department of Conservation. And so I would tell you absolutely yes, and we'd love to chat more about that. We think it's an exciting time out there, because just like you saw there with the paychecks with a purpose, what's cool about this is that it gives people an opportunity, to move into a new career. This methane measurement isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And it really does deliver, in addition to a good paying job, also that feeling of accomplishment and knowing that the work you're doing is really rolls up into part of the bigger picture. So thanks for that.
And I'm gonna end with a comment, and it was from a question from Emma asking, do you have a backlog of wells that are proven to be leaking methane significantly? And I'm going to answer that. The answer to that is yes. And we are a 501c3, so if you're up to being a member, even for as low as $10 a month, or you have connections with corporations who are interested in sponsoring plugging wells, we have more wells and more work than Curtis can even get to, and donations certainly help that process. So I'll let Curtis have the final word, but thanks again, everyone, for attending. And our next webinar again is March 6th, where you can sign up at LinkedIn, our website, or Eventbrite. And Curtis will have the latest news from DC because he will have been on the Hill all day and can give you up-to-date information. And again, thanks everyone for your help. Go ahead, Curtis.
Well, it's an honor to have an opportunity to share with you folks today. I appreciate it. See a lot of great friends on the screen here, and sorry I didn't have a chance to say hi to everybody. Certainly would love to follow up. This is important work that we're all doing, and this is a team sport, and we certainly want to encourage folks to get out and participate, and kind of however you can. But again, it's got to be done safely. It's got to be done with intention, because what we can't afford to have are people getting injured or worse as a result of this. And so, again, the work is making a difference one well at a time, and we're certainly thrilled. We appreciate you guys showing up here today, taking time out of your busy day to spend it with the likes of me and Leslie, of course, who's wonderful. But we look forward to more of these. And as always, please don't hesitate to reach out and say hello. Thanks so much, folks.
Have a good day, everyone. Thanks again.